And welcome back to the pottery shop. Today I'm going to be starting a little piggy bank. They're super fun and cute. They start off as a jug. So right here beside me I have 4 3/4 pounds of clay, and that's going to get us started. So again, this is another item that is started wet on the wheel, and then I'll finish it up when it's leather hard. So again, my centering tool. So get it rolling, find my sponge. Oh, how about the grindy of the centering tool on the wheel head? Like I've said before, it keeps that carpal tunnel at bay, because that'll creep in on a potter real fast if you don't keep something happening to keep your joints from getting worn out. It's another reason why I stand, is to keep my back straight. Alright, well that looks nice and centered up. Get this tool out of the way. And it's just like any other piece. I'm going to start off opening. So I'm going to drive my fist right on down through there. Now, the fist really makes light work of the opening process. It just burrows right through the clay. A lot less stressful on the joints than using just your thumb or your index finger, whatever finger you choose to use to open a ball of clay. Alright, get a nice compression. And the bottom's slightly rounded because it is going to be the bottom of a pig. This will not be a jug in the end, it will be a pig. So it'll be set up on 4 little legs. That looks pretty good. Rinse my hands. And I'll get that first pull going. I'm pushing forward and pinch. You know, sometimes the clay will kind of slip off center as you're working, so you're constantly trying to pull it back onto center. It's a real aggressive pull. Right on up, and I'm leaving an extra thick rim, because that'll be the spout at the end when I get to that. Alright, mop out that water. Add it to the rim up here. A lot of water in the bottom. Can't leave water standing in clay. It starts to push the particles apart, and it'll cause cracks. So you have to add the water to make it nice and slick for smooth throwing, but you got to mop it out, because if it sits there too long, it'll cause all those little clay particles to separate, and you'll end up with various kinds of cracks in the end finish. So always got to constantly be mopping it up. There's pull number 2. I'm going to get that water out of the bottom. Starts to get tricky getting your hand down in there as you move. So in the end of the process, I won't use much water, because I don't want it to go down to the bottom and have to try to get it out of there. So another undercut, being real aggressive with this, get that weight up into the piece. And if you notice, my wrist is riding on the rim. That keeps the piece in center. It's real easy when you start getting things thin at the bottom for that top part to go warbly while you're pulling the bottom part up. And I found a great way to keep that from happening is by riding my hand, so you can see where the clay, so that actually rides right on the rim, and that little bit of friction keeps the whole piece on center. It's really a neat thing. Throwing some really tall pots one day, I discovered it, and now I use it all the time. Used to always be self-conscious. Don't let your wrist touch the piece. The next thing you know, that thing's flopping all over the place. Alright, so I'm going to start shaping this guy now. So I'm pushing in at the bottom and out. I'm going to push it on out like so. It's going to be a nice, healthy, fat, pot-belly piggy bank. Alright, you see how much clay I've left up here at the rim. That's really important. When I go to neck that in, tighten it up into the spout for the snout, you're actually taking the clay across there. You're not just condensing it and making it thicker, which is a misconception in pottery. You're actually stretching the clay around the shape. So you have to have extra clay up there. I'm going to get a little more shape here in the body. It's not quite where I want it, because once I get this spout going, I won't get down inside of this piece much more. It'll actually get to the point where you cannot get down into the piece. Alright, so that looks pretty good and round. And I do not have a lot of clay or water in the bottom. It looks really clean. So now I'm going to neck this in. So I kind of have about 4 points of contact. And you can watch, it's not just moving forward, it's actually moving around the spout. So I'll neck it in a little ways. Then I'll pause. You got to keep it on center. I don't want to have to trim any off of the rim to get it on the center. You know, if it happens, it happens. And get those drips off of my hand, because they'll drip right down in the bottom, and then you got to go find some way to get a sponge down through the neck. Alright, and stretch that spout up a little bit. And back to... Alright, now a common question is, how do you get the cork to fit? Because clay shrinks, I've gone over that before, clay shrinks about 15% from the start to the finish. So you do have to compensate for that when you're making a piece that's going to have a cork in it. I like to do the little cork nose in my pigs. Real expressive eyes. I have a sitting pig too that I will make eventually, but not today. Alright, so this is the cork that I'm going to use. And it has a taper, so this will be going into the opening. This will be on the outside. And the trick to get a cork to fit is to measure the opening with this end of the cork. And then when it shrinks, it lands somewhere in here, and the cork fits just nicely. So that is pretty much the right size right there. So I do not need to make this any narrower. I just need to clean up the rim and make a spout. So I like a nice tall rim on my pigs. I mean, a nice long snout. So since I've left all this nice clay up here, I've got a good bit to work with. You know, pigs are a great first piece of pottery. You know, you can get one for a kid, for a birthday, nice Christmas present. Make that a little. Oh yeah, that's right where I like it, just like that. And I like to leave a pretty nice round rim on there. Get that shoulder. Alright, let's double check that my cork still fits. It's a little narrow, of course, because I got it the right size to begin with and then kept working with it. Stretch it out just a little bit. Perfect. Right where I want it. Now when I do a whole bunch of jugs, like a big order of jugs, not pigs, I have a couple different size corks. So if I do happen to get one with a hole that's too big, I have a little bigger cork that works. Alright, well that is pretty much there for the pig. So once it's leather hard, we'll finish this little guy up. I'm doing my undercut and cut it off with the wire. Wire tool's stuck under the centering tool. I always check the bottom when I cut it off and make sure that it doesn't have, that the bottom's not too thin. There's really nothing you can do about a thin bottom. And if it's too thick, you can trim it, but too thin, there's really not much you can do. All right, well, there is the start of a little piggy. And thanks for watching. Alright, so once the jugs are leather hard, so they feel about like cheddar cheese, we'll need to trim a rounded bottom on the bottom of them before we can decorate them. This is another instance where the Giffen grip comes in really handy because it has those nice stilts and it supports the jug up on its narrow opening. So it's another time when these are pretty nice. Otherwise, you need to use a chuck or something to hold your piece upright. But I'm just going to round this off. A nice round jug. I just keep taking it from the outside and I want it to be relatively round. I'm trying not to have a real flat part on the bottom, so that's why I keep going to the outside before I go all the way across the bottom. Almost got it. And you know, it's tough sometimes when you're trimming to know how thick the piece is. This is always a concern, you know, without taking it off and feeling it with your fingers. In an instance like this, you wouldn't be able to get into the inside of the piece anyway. So a technique that I have found that works pretty good is tapping on it. And I'll actually put my ear directly on the bottom and then tap and listen for a change in the tone, I guess you'd say, as you come across. So just put my ear there. And that sounds pretty good. If it's not right, it'll go dun 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 donk dun dun dun. So that's how you can tell if it's, you know, pretty even, is with tapping on it. And you know, I discovered that a long time ago. It was a very exciting day when I figured out how to distinguish whether or not a pot needed trimmed anymore. There is nothing worse than when you are a potter. You've got all your pretty pieces laid out in front of a customers at a show or something, and everybody picks the pieces up and goes, "Oh, wow, that's so heavy. I can't even imagine putting anything in it and using it." So, you know, most potters strive to have their pieces light. I personally try to strive for my pieces to weigh what they look like they're going to weigh. So when somebody picks up one of my pots, I want it to feel correctly. I don't want them to pick it up and almost hit themselves in the face with it because it's too light, or, you know, that horrible, you know, ugh. So your eye kind of has a preconceived notion of what something should weigh before you pick it up. So I try to get that right there. So here in a minute, we'll decorate these puppies.